Welcome to The Bottom Line, everybody. Jaco Booyens here. I'm excited to talk about law enforcement and what the role of law enforcement is in a society, how that affects our fight in human trafficking. But before I start, I want to talk to you about coffee, because you are coffee drinkers. Most of you are coffee drinkers. So why don't you drink Storyville coffee? Every time you drink a cup of Storyville coffee that's in my mug here at the moment, you help us save a life from sex trafficking. Storyville literally pours money straight from every single bag that is subscribed to into the fight against sex trafficking. So thank you to John and Esther and the team at Storyville, Melanie, Matt, Gary. We love and appreciate you for standing with us to defend and protect human lives, women, children, men, boys, from trafficking. And Storyville's logo and motto is love everybody. So subscribe to Storyville. Go to storyvillecoffee.com. They're the #1 roaster in the United States, award-winning. They ship it to your door fresh. It's fantastic coffee, and there's a lot of other goodies on their site. So help us fight trafficking by drinking a cup of coffee, which you do anyway. Ida D'Antonio Hangen.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Ida, your journey, we met in not too unique circumstances for me, where I go to a college campus and I speak, and you reached out and you were so gracious as an educator, as a professor, particularly with an incredible history in the work we do. And I'll never forget when I got on stage that day, you had a play.
Yeah. And
the play depicted human trafficking. And your student body got to observe and interact and engage. And, it was really amazing. And I really appreciate that. A little bit about your history as an educator before we get to that previous history. You teach.
I do. I'm a professor at New Mexico State University, and I'm in the criminal justice department. And so the 4 classes that I teach are criminal investigations, human trafficking, forensic law, and criminal law. And so my favorites are the criminal investigations and human trafficking, simply because I like to do hands-on practical stuff in those, and also be human trafficking because it's an important topic, and we need to be educating others about this horrid crime.
I think, look, at least and I travel a lot. Mm-hmm. I mean, all over, and I engage with a lot of colleges. I think in 1 year, I spoke at 35 college campuses, everything from Brown to UCLA, TCU, Texas A&M. So I think I've got an interesting perspective on this. I really believe that out of all my travels, you're the most proactive educator to help combat human trafficking that I've ever come across in higher education. We've got some teachers in high school, mm-hmm. school board members. I'm thinking of Julie Pickren in the Texas State School Board. They fight. But when we talk about professors, mm-hmm. in the age, in the era where there's a lot going on college campus, you are a champion for the lost, the brokenhearted, the afflicted. But it didn't start there. This came with you.
Right.
When you became an educator.
Right.
Where were you born and raised?
I was born in El Paso, Texas.
Texas girl from the border.
Exactly.
Literally.
Yes.
From the belly of the beast.
Right.
And then your journey, your path led you into the FBI.
Yes, it did.
What was that journey?
Well, kind of to backtrack a little bit, when I graduated with my criminal justice degree from UTEP, I came out to the Dallas area, and one of the first places that I was able to get some kind of law enforcement experience was at adult probation. And then really, FBI was my goal, and so I wanted law enforcement experience. So I went out to Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, DPS, and became, a firefighter and a police officer. And then finally I was able to process through the FBI. And they sent me to Las Cruces, New Mexico, where I did 22 years. 22 years
in the FBI?
Yes.
In what was your critical focus within the FBI?
So I was
at a field office.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I was assigned to basically violent crimes. And so anything from like bank robberies to assaults on federal agents, some even some drug and gang investigations. But my major focus was crimes against children And later, when human trafficking started getting really big, I was asked to form a human trafficking task force and investigate that crime. So that's where my passion grew.
And your territory would be what for those 22 years? Is it how wide was that territory? The state of Texas, or
no? So I was in New Mexico, and so I was basically from half of the. If you look at New Mexico, half of the state. So like right above or right below Socorro. And then down to Las Cruces, and then all the way to the Arizona border, and then all the way to, I guess, technically like Ruidoso, New Mexico, which is in the
so not crossing over into Texas.
No.
So, but you would work with field offices in Texas and,
Yes.
and vice versa.
Most of the crimes, when it's at the federal level, they cross interstate.
Sure.
Otherwise, we can't prosecute them. And so, yes, all our crimes that we investigated crossed the lines at some point.
Yeah. Or the border.
Or the border, absolutely.
Which is the ultimate line.
Yeah.
I mean, into the country. Help me understand, and for the viewer also, just to understand the process of going from law enforcement into the FBI. I mean, do you just get tapped on the shoulder one day?
No.
Do you apply? I mean, talk through, and I know the process, but help, because I want people to understand the law enforcement background and the journey into the FBI.
Yeah. So everybody has to apply the same way, and you apply online. Now it's online. Back then you had to physically go into the office and fill out that application, and then they'd say, okay, we'll set you up for the test. And the test could, I won't say what it consists of in case that's, an FBI secret. let the applicants figure that out. But so you take a written test and things like that. And then when you pass, you get told, you're going to go up in front of the interview board, and there's 3 or 4 individuals that are interviewing you, and situational questions and things like that. So you answer those, and then if you pass, then they set you up for your medical, your physical exam, and a polygraph and things like that. And so when you pass all the little different processes, then they tell you, okay, you've made it. You're gonna go to the FBI Academy on a certain date.
How long is the academy?
The academy now is, I think, 20 weeks. When I went through, it was only 16 weeks.
Okay. Is previous law enforcement experience required?
It's not required, no. It does help because you've already been dealing with the law and know how to understand the stops and the probable cause and search warrants and different things like that. But you can have all you need is 2 years work experience full time, and then a degree in really kind of anything now. Yeah.
Okay. Let's transition to trafficking for a second here, and through the lens of the FBI.
Okay.
And I want to keep this conversation for that purpose agnostic of a particular regime, because the crime is outliving presidents.
Yes.
And it predates our nation.
Absolutely.
And so I think so much. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I think, and we write a lot of policy and we champion a lot of policy. And I think a lot of policy in this country is designed, but it's designed with a particular moment in time in mind, and the long-term thought, for at least what I can tell, and we touched 144 bills this last session. It goes by the wayside. And so we're finding, for instance, in family court, right, a tremendous amount of inconsistencies where certain bills negate bills. When you're law enforcement and there's the law in something like the season that you walked through and we walked through, when human trafficking wasn't discussed, we had no state laws on the books pre-2015, which is when you were in there. Talk to me about whatever comes to mind in that transition of the older days without necessarily laws specifically to, let's say, minor child exploitation, to where we are today. How much leeway does an FBI agent have? Kind of help us understand a little bit of that world from a sex trafficking perspective.
Sure. So I guess before the human trafficking statutes were presented and passed, you had the White Slavery Traffic Act. And so that's kind of where these cases would fall under. So we had a case in New Mexico. You might have heard about it, the toy box serial killer, torturer. and it's David Parker Ray. So at that time, he was kidnapping women, mainly a lot of prostitutes, and then drugging them and then putting them in, torturing them in his toy box. And so when he was finally arrested, that's what they were kind of looking at to prosecute under that. And so, but after that, I always have the main case agent on that come to my class and talk about that case. I mean, it would fall under sex trafficking. So it would have been nice to have those federal laws in place
at that time.
Yes, at that time, to give him to be able to go after him federally as opposed to just the state charges that he received. But yeah, the once we started, and I think what happened is it started first with the crimes against children, and they needed a volunteer in the office, and I was married, but I didn't have any children yet, and I thought, well, I'll do this, because the other agents didn't want to do it. It was too hard on them because they had kids and things like that, and so all I wanted to do was get these guys behind bars because of the fact that they were harming these children, making them pose in different sexual, positions, and just it was horrible. And I couldn't believe that and stuff. And so we had laws that were more at that time to protect that. And if you traveled to meet a child, boom, there was a law that we could charge in order to arrest you for that. If you not so much just possession of pornography, of child pornography. Sometimes at first it was, yes, we could charge, but then later, because there was an identified database, then they said if the children aren't identified, then we can't charge. And so that hurt because there's, still know that there's children are being abused.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was just like, it just, boggled my mind.
And we still operate with that today.
Yes.
You have to identify the child, and it's problematic.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And so it stemmed from that. And so looking at that, you never heard really about children being trafficked, though, when I was investigating that. And so when human trafficking just came on the forefront, and it was 2009, then I was asked, will you create this task force? We're going to assign you this crime now, and we want to start educating this, federal, state, local. And so, I think people still got it confused with alien smuggling, because I remember having agents in the office going, hey, I got this case for you. And I would read it. I'm like, this is alien smuggling. It's not sex trafficking. So it's so important to know what that crime really entails. And, obviously it's force, fraud, coercion of a person thrown into either sex trafficking or labor exploitation. And so that's when, we created this task force and started educating anyone who wanted to come. It wasn't just for law enforcement. And in that's when our cases started coming in, because people started getting understanding what it looked like.
Yeah, so many of the survivors did not know they were victims.
Right.
We meet weekly women and children, men, boys at times too, who would say, I was trafficked and I didn't know. I didn't know that was trafficking. Exactly. Because what is normal for somebody is not abnormal.
Right.
And if they're told and indoctrinated that it is normal, that's their life and the reality at that point. Okay, when did you leave the FBI?
2018.
And was that straight into higher education?
Yes.
Okay.
I did in between. There was a time where I was working at the children's camp when the kids started coming across the border unaccompanied. And so I worked about 5 shifts out there in the children's camp. And I felt like, some of these kids were falling into hands that shouldn't be in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The decision to leave the FBI, is that, and maybe personal, you may not be able to answer, was it a family decision, or was it more just, I am looking for a career change?
No, I have a son, and he was going to be in eighth grade that year, and I knew I was eligible, and I also knew I wanted to teach, and so I was obtaining my master's my last few years before I retired, and I wanted to be available for him throughout his high school, and so everything lined up to where I got my degree. I hit the 22 years, and I was already, 50 years old. And so when I received the call that I had a human trafficking class funded at NMSU is when I said, okay, I'm going to submit my papers. And so it was just that I had already set out when I wanted to retire.
Yeah, and you've been teaching since.
I have.
And you're still teaching.
I am.
But even like today, you were consulting us today, still on cases we're working. You are in this fight, and look, we have to, in order to eradicate this crime, is we have to educate culture, stop demand,
Exactly.
stop the exploitation of persons for self-gratification. You can't arrest yourself. Would you agree if I said we will not arrest ourselves out of this problem, and we will not rescue ourselves, out of this problem? It's not just rescue all the children or arrest all the bad guys, because it is a moral crime.
It is. And
it's difficult. I mean, it's an individual thing of morality. What is life like as an FBI agent? I mean, what is that culture like?
Yeah. So yeah, every day is a little bit different, but I still remember when I landed in Washington D.C. and I loaded the bus that was picking up the applicants, new people, new cadets. I don't know what you want to call us, and I was the only one on the bus because I guess I arrived, so late at night. But that feeling that you drive in and then you're in Quantico, and then all of a sudden you see the FBI Academy. It's still I love that feeling. I'm like, I made it. You know what I mean? So, and then you train and you come out, and so every day is a little bit different. And some cases are long term, some cases are shorter, and so it's never really a typical everyday, life. You can get a case, and like I said, you have to go do interviews and then do certain other steps. And you may not have the probable cause yet to maybe go arrest that person. Yeah. You got to keep, and you work side by side with these federal prosecutors. So really, when you have a case, you consult them and say, this is what I have. And they'll tell you, okay, that sounds good. Make sure you do this, this, and this for us to just, keep pursuing it and everything. So you're constantly guided by a federal prosecutor. And, so that's how the cases get to.
And your corporate climate, your corporate superiors in that kind of environment. I mean, and this is an opinion question. So in your opinion, I mean, has it changed? And 22 years is a
right.
Let's just talk about that tenure, the 22-year tenure. Did you see change? And things change by nature with culture, but I guess systemically, from a vision and a mission of the FBI, right? I mean,
the mission is to protect the United States really from people from the crimes that are going to be committed against us and things like that. So I don't know that the mission has changed, but sometimes the focus is on other things. And at that time, it was human trafficking. I don't know so much that it's the focus. And I don't think anybody replaced me in my office when I retired to be investigating human trafficking, because I know I've inquired a few times and they're like, no, nobody's investigating that. So then you have to go to, the main office up in Albuquerque and see who's up investigating there, or maybe down to El Paso and everything. So to me, it's like, okay, so that's not a initiative that they wanted to keep the focus on, and it needs to be, because you're talking about children
more now than ever.
Yes,
and it should never stop,
right?
Because it's children, which is the future of America, and they're Americans.
Yes,
and they have the same freedoms, and they deserve to be protected. And so it's when law enforcement fails for whatever reason. Right? Let's not even pin the blame here on the individual or a system, just when it fails for whatever reason. And not just at the law enforcement side, but the judicial side, the criminal justice system, the Department of Justice. Right? In your opinion, is it difficult? Is it impossible? Is it challenging to run a society when those systems don't function the way they're intended to function?
No, you can't. You need the systems to function in order to not have chaos in your society. And if there's no consequences for trafficking children, and then it's going to, rise even more. There's going to be more demand to be doing that. And so you have to have the consequences and have the laws on the books in order to prosecute these individuals, and then put them away for a long time and not just let them get out in order to continue what they're doing with, trafficking children and things.
Or see the cases pled down to a different kind of a case, and this is what's happening, Ida, with trafficking a lot at the moment. I mean, we've got so many cases that we're managing. I think we're managing 17 at the moment, and the fear is always, or the concern is always, that some district attorney is going to plead this down to a marijuana charge or a illegal, even kidnapping.
Yeah.
They'll plead it down to kidnapping, or they look for priors.
Mm-hmm.
They love looking for priors and find, there's 3 DUIs, or there's, a fugitive charge, or there's whatever else, probation, violation of probation. But we're talking about selling children for sex here. Let's get the guy for this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily happen often.
Right.
And when you're telling me that the office, the position you vacated stays vacant, that's consistent with what I'm finding across the country.
Mm-hmm.
When Defund the Police happened, that movement, if you can call it that
right.
insane concept,
right, that
you could defund the police and have a society that's functioning, is an absolutely absurd,
right,
notion.
Right.
Because we cannot do the work we do without law enforcement, because it's the law.
Exactly.
And we want the guy to go away, which means there's always going to be some scumbag lawyer that'll defend the guy and try and get him off. And if you make it easy, they'll walk. So, but I'm finding across the country that special task forces that were disbanded because of the lack of funding, because in Defund the Police, what my experience, the first element of law enforcement that was eroded was crimes against children.
Yeah.
These special units.
Yeah.
SVU, Vice.
Right.
Yeah, they were just gone. Dallas Vice, 2 years, no Vice.
Wow.
In a major city. You're talking about a city that's touching close to 10 million people, DFW.
And you know what people don't understand, unless you've worked with victims, is that there is a history there. There's a reason that, say a woman is prostituting herself, she has a history. So she was, drug into that. And that's all they know. Exploited, trafficked. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so instead of looking to help, you shouldn't just be, trying to arrest them. And how about rescuing them and giving them some skills to be able to function in society? And so, there was, up until, I don't know how long ago, there's some state laws that still arrest juvenile prostitutes.
Yeah.
And it's like, why are you doing that to them? They're kind of been brainwashed to believe they're trafficker, because they usually start off as like the boyfriend method, where they really trust them and love them. But then you have these stings, and then they're arresting these juveniles, and that's not the right approach.
Well, frankly, also the adults. Every single case we've ever had, I've personally never, in 28 years fighting human trafficking, I've never met what the world would call a prostitute that is actually a prostitute. Right. And by definition, somebody who had never been exploited, was not coerced, wasn't defrauded, wasn't threatened with their life for safety, security, means, food, shelter, love, belonging, right? That didn't then age out of the juvenile system, right? So we're talking about a person that just one morning wakes up and just says, you know what? It's going to sell my body over and over a day, not for a season, over. And there's a history, there's a story. And when you then have law enforcement that's not trained for that communication style, at the point of arresting a pimp or intervening with her on what we call the track, right? And you relegate it to the local just cop, uniform unit who has to respond to everything from petty theft to, auto theft to, battery and assault, whatever, right? To the road accident, and all of a sudden there has to be a human trafficking expert to know how to speak to a victim. It's not happening.
No.
And the system's failing there. And we're putting an unholy pressure on the cop who's not an SVU or Vice, didn't have that specific training. Sure, there's prostitution concept and law, and so they revert to just arrest. Because what are they going to do? And then when it's minors, it's really tricky. And then we get into other elements. How frequently did you guys and ladies interact with other law enforcement, sheriff's departments, marshals?
We did it a lot.
PD?
We had task forces, and so with me being on the criminal side, we had a task force made of Las Cruces PD, Sheriff's Office, Marshals, and Border Patrol. And so we all worked together. And
so multi-agency.
Yeah. And so they were in there, and a lot of times they were looking more at like drugs and gang activity. That's how you can work together to get all aspects of it. But anytime I had where we did an undercover operation, because we're targeting, we want to arrest these pimps, and we want to see if these girls need rescuing. So we would do, and it's man intensive.
Yeah.
And so,
hours.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
super.
so we needed at least 30 on the ground, surveillance in the hotel, the arrest team, the undercover, and all that. But our purpose was not to arrest the girls who showed up. The purpose is to try and see who dropped them off. Where's their pimp? Let's go after them.
That's right. The buyer.
Exactly.
Yeah. The John.
So since these were undercover, the John was our undercover.
Yes. It was a reverse thing. Yeah.
And so, but we always offered these girls, it's like, are you being trafficked? How can we help you? And we only maybe arrested 2 that I can think of. One was ticketed, but one who was just hardened. She was already in her 50s.
Yeah.
She was kind of like
part of the crime.
Yeah.
She was the madam.
Yeah.
She was the recruiter, the bottom girl, the recruiter.
Exactly.
She was actually become part of the crime.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's in a society today where we look at things and people say, well, Jaco, what is a ruling? I can't even call it a law, but a ruling by a judge or a governor that you can't arrest anybody that steals under $930 from a Walgreens, right?
Right.
What does that do, Jaco, to your fight? Crime begets crime.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's the notion that the law is not going to prevail, that they're not going to come when we break the law.
Mm-hmm.
And so it begets other crime. There's a direct correlation. If you look at New York City, that does catch and release day of with pedophiles,
right.
Literally,
yeah.
A pedophile with a child is caught, is booked, fingerprinted, and released with no bail.
It doesn't make any sense.
It's insane.
Yeah.
And somehow society then has to go, you know what, I won't do it again.
Yeah.
It's not how this works. Right. I mean, the consequence has to be there. And
exactly.
So I think to a degree for me, and I've had so many conversations with New York PD, and we work with law enforcement across this country. I mean, every 3-letter agency, we've worked with them, and we at times work with them, the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent. It's life.
Right.
People are broken, they make mistakes. But it gets really challenging when you're standing with law enforcement in an operation and they are demoralized.
Yeah.
You know, like what's happening on our border at the moment. And they feel like, does this make a difference? Does it matter?
Right.
3 weeks ago, I'm with law enforcement and we're on a particular case. And there was a moment where one of the individuals looked at me and just said, we've rescued her 5 times before. What is happening with the rest of the system?
Right.
And she's back with the same pimp.
Yeah.
And so, because those agents, who they were, or officers, they're not judges, they're not prosecutors.
Right.
So they do their job, find the girl, the guy, and do the handover to Health and Human Services or CPS, right, or DFPS, and then they get a call from their superior, from the chief, saying, "Hey, you need to go find Jessica again."
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? We worked how many hours?
Right.
Thousands of hours. Right. We found her. We'll go find her again, and again, and again, and again, and it's very demoralizing. And I find that a lot.
Yeah.
And so, okay, that the stigma, if it is, or the portrait that Hollywood loves to paint of the disdain between PD and FBI. Every movie scene, the FBI shows up and the cops badmouth them. It's like, oh, here they come, the Fed. And so, talk to me a little bit about that situation.
Yeah, no, it's not reality. We always work so closely with the locals. We need each other.
It's not possible without.
No, absolutely no. So those task forces that we had, they were amazing, and we had some good people working, and they all different. They try to rotate them out every so many years, and some of them get so attached to working on these task forces that they don't want to be rotated. But I mean, they sometimes hear more stuff than the FBI because they're on the ground.
Local.
They're in the neighborhoods. They're
the community. The climate.
They know these people who are on the streets, giving them information that gives us, information. So yeah, we work closely together. And like bank robberies, it's a federal crime, but who gets the panic button goes to the PD first. So they are always the ones that respond first, and then we come along. It's like what needs to be done, and then we work together. And then after a while, they'll say, okay, well, you guys have the better hit, take it federally. So cases are talked about. It's like, okay, you're going to keep it and this and that, but they know that there is going to be more of a prison sentence if they take it federally. And so really, there's never really been up. I mean, do you have some issues sometimes? Yeah, sure, that's common.
But that's human nature.
Yeah, exactly. But for the most part, you work together. Yeah,
because, and again, now I'll say this for the viewer who goes, oh, is Jaco going soft on the FBI? Jaco is not going soft on the FBI. Ida's no longer in the FBI, and I can say things she won't say. I can't say. No, I'm not going soft on the FBI. The FBI at the moment in 2023 is failing the American people, and I'm not talking about the agent that leaves his family, that puts his suit on or his civvies and kisses his wife goodbye or her husband goodbye, and doesn't know or the officer, the cop that doesn't know if he's walking into an armed robbery or a road accident, or I'm talking about leadership, and it's completely evident that justice, overarching justice, the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, local police department, we have a justice problem in America at the moment of Lady Justice being blind.
Exactly. We just need to, Lady Justice needs to just be blind.
She needs to be blind.
Period.
Innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
You have the right to be in front of a jury of your peers, to defend yourself or to make the accusation and say that man did this and let the jury decide, not a DA pleading it down. And so politics is the sport of the day. Mm-hmm. Politics is the celebrity of the day. And so, no, I'm not going soft, because we have had very, very difficult times with law enforcement in all levels, whether it is a deputy sheriff, a sheriff, Secretary Mayorkas on the border, whatever, and all the way up and down the ladder. This is America. Justice has to be blind.
Yeah.
And we need justice, and we need law enforcement, and we need the DOJ. Something that's really bothered me, Ida, for a long time is human trafficking, which is so broad. Mm-hmm. Labor trafficking, debt bondage, et cetera, and then sexual exploitation, and then sexual exploitation of minors, because it's two sets of laws, 17 and under, 18 and over, federal statutes, state statutes. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. What has bothered me is that human trafficking as an entity sits under the Department of Labor.
Yeah.
Why in the world? And I asked this question in the White House under the Trump administration, physically standing in the White House. Mm-hmm. Why is it not under the Department of Justice? Funding earmarked, intensives, trainings, initiatives, and then it takes an executive order by a president to fund the U.S. Marshals to initiate operations, and all of a sudden you go and there's sting operations, and you got FBI, local sheriffs, you got everybody working together, and it's 150 arrests. But to a degree, I understand on the labor trafficking component, it's a labor issue.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're talking about our predominant issue here is not labor trafficking, and we have a lot of labor trafficking.
Right.
Debt bondage.
Yeah.
But sex trafficking, sexual exploitation is through the roof. It's exploded, and we need that under the Justice Department.
Yeah. My
opinion.
Right, and it is under the Justice Department, because they have, that purview falls under,
sure.
FBI and HSI, and they go through that. But I had a few human labor exploitation cases that we were able to, take. One got pled down, but one we took to trial, and then the jury found them not guilty. So we were able to do some of those and everything. But you're right. I mean, should the labor department come in also and assist? Yes, because the more hands-on you have, it's like, okay, if we didn't get them with this, then can we get them with this? You know.
But that's my approach, right? And we had this conversation in our office this morning. Here's a case we're working, super complex. How do you eat this apple? What's the first bite? And then strategically thinking. But my understanding, though, is at Congress and at the congressional level, and we were talking about appropriating funding, because when you talk law enforcement, you're going to talk funding.
Yeah.
It's always funding.
Yep.
Federal level, maybe it's a little different because the FBI is very well funded. But when you start talking to Sheriff Brad Coe in Texas on the border, that literally our organization had to buy him a drone, had to buy night vision. I'm talking about, had to put tires on his vehicles.
Right.
An NGO.
Yeah.
That's a failure of the system. Yeah. Somewhere, something's not right. Yeah. I mean, we are relegating these guys to say, for all intents and purposes, defend the country.
Right.
Defend the country. Against what? We don't know. Terrorism, national security, human trafficking, labor trafficking, who knows what.
Right.
But defend the country. Yeah. Right. And they go, funding. And so funding for me, when you position it under the Labor Department, Justice Department, ultimately in Congress and the Senate, it's appropriating funding. And I feel like we're losing the battle with funding law enforcement appropriately, which leads to making recruiting very difficult. I know for a fact in Houston, one of the largest recruitment centers for PD in the nation, they had to lower their standards. So as a society, we're saying we want more from cops.
Yeah.
We want a higher standard, but don't fund them.
Yeah.
But now we can't recruit.
Right.
Now you lower your standards, and it's a vicious cycle.
It is.
So
and there's a shortage all over the United States. So it's
dramatic.
Yeah. It's not good.
I think at the moment of this taping, we're between 2,000 and 3,000 officers short in Dallas PD. 1,000.
Wow.
So now the stress and the pressure compounds on the other officers.
Yes, definitely.
Who are human beings. There's people in those uniforms.
Yeah.
Fathers, mothers, sons, daughters. So your faith. Talk to me about your faith.
All right.
As a component, briefly.
Yeah.
Within being a professor, former law enforcement, and an advisor and a consultant, but your faith as a mother.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't have done, the law enforcement or any part of life without Jesus Christ. I mean, that's my foundation, always has been. But I've never walked closer than I am, the last few years. And I don't know how people manage without having a savior like Jesus, all, problems, I go to him. He leads me. I can't say enough. I mean, it's just all my happiness, everything just comes from having that faith in him.
And your purpose.
And my purpose, absolutely.
Yeah.
So whenever I see others that are broken, it's like I try to lead them that way. It's like, let me tell you about Jesus.
I echo your thoughts. I think it is a very, very difficult journey.
Yeah.
This thing called life.
Yeah.
Is a very difficult journey when you are your own deity.
Yeah.
When you are God or void of God, because somebody's God. Yeah. There's no such thing as there's just an atheist is nothing. Somebody's in charge. So who's in charge?
Right.
And if it really falls on your shoulders, that gets really difficult when sickness of loved ones comes in, or when money can't fix the problem. In our world, no matter who the family is, when a child is broken, fix her, and it's not just fix her.
Right.
It's we got to pray. Now we need the Holy Spirit to come in. Now we need redemption and healing that you can't buy.
No. And that's the problem with, the John today, the trafficker. It's all about pride. They have such pride that they can't, get past that and see the love of Jesus Christ. And that's a problem, with all the crime.
The ultimate sin.
The ultimate sin.
Pride. Yeah. And pride comes before the fall.
Yeah.
And there's no question. And it's interesting that you reference that. And I think it's the only way. If anybody's in law enforcement today, with the stuff they see and the stuff we see, I mean, you can't. It's not sustainable on your own. Human nature, you just cannot. And I think that's why culture. It's easier for culture to just say, you know what, we'll just give in a little bit. Is porn really that bad? Yes. It is.
Yeah.
It's the feeder drug.
Yeah.
It's a destructive force.
It is.
In our culture. I can talk to you for days and days. Please come back.
I will. Thank you for having me.
Have some other conversation. Thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for speaking truth into young minds on the college campus and for being bold with your faith. God bless you.
You too.
Talk to you guys next time.